We're going to conclude our study of the book of Ruth today in chapter 4. This beautiful account of the redemption of Ruth and Naomi is continued. Boaz wants to marry Ruth and take her into his house and be her kinsman redeemer. Now, I've used that term kinsman redeemer several times. That's the Old Testament term in the Hebrew, goel, G-O-E-L. And this was the individual who could redeem a widow who had lost her husband and had no children, but needed someone to come alongside and basically rescue them. There's very few safety nets for people in the Old Testament, especially for women. Most of them could not make a living, even survive on their own, and so they needed safety nets. And if a husband died and they had no one to take care of them, the next safety net would be family. But in this case, there's not much of a family for Naomi and Ruth, and so it's left up to the next relatives down the line, the kinsman redeemer, the kinsman who would come around to redeem. Boaz wants to do that for Ruth, but cannot, because there's a kinsman redeemer, a goel, who is in place first. He has first choice. So Boaz arranges a meeting, an official court meeting, basically. In verse 4, he says to this other man that he can step up and buy the property that belongs to Naomi as part of the kinsman redeeming process. But if you do, he says to you, verse 5, you must also acquire Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of the deceased. So you can buy the property which the man wanted, but you're going to also have to take the widow whom the man did not want. In verse 6, he says, I cannot redeem it for myself, because it would jeopardize my own inheritance. Redeem it for yourself. You may have my right of redemption, for I cannot redeem it. So it doesn't give us any real clear understanding why he could not redeem it, except it would jeopardize his own inheritance. That could be that he was already married, had his own children, and so forth. We're not positive, but he steps aside and he relinquishes his right to redemption to Boaz, who was absolutely thrilled to take on that role. And so he makes an official contract in front of the officials of the land here, and Ruth the Moabitess becomes, verse 10, his wife. In verse 11, all the people who were in the court and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah. And then also, moreover, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. Now, he speaks of Perez because this is in the line of Boaz and the whole family here. So this is important to them. So what does Boaz do? He took Ruth, and she became, verse 13, his wife. And the next thing we know, she's pregnant, is going to have a child. And she does. She gives birth to a son in verse 13. In verse 14, this is very interesting. In verse 14, the woman said to Naomi, not to Ruth, Naomi, blessed is the Lord who has not left you without a redeemer today, and may his name become famous in Israel. May he also be to you a restorer of life and a sustainer of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons has given birth to him. It's interesting that the village ladies here see Ruth as the one being redeemed. Not Ruth, Naomi. Ruth is the one we would expect, but Naomi is the one who's come home destitute. And what a beautiful thing here, because Naomi comes home bitter, distant from God, hard-hearted, sending her other daughter-in-law back to her gods. But here we have Naomi being blessed of God. She has a kinsman redeemer who has stepped up. And the redeemer here is not, as we would expect, Boaz, although he obviously is in the process, but the credit is given to this baby Obed. Obed, who's being born to Ruth, is going to be the redeemer of her. And so I think that's an interesting thing that we find here. And we find in verse 17, they named him Obed, and he's the father of Jesse, the father of David. So Obed would be the great-grandfather actually the grandfather of David. And so we're toward the end of the Judges here. And so in verse 22, it closes with that. Now, the big issue here is this. This whole book is a picture not just of what happened in the Old Testament account, but the picture of our kinsman redeemer, Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ comes to us in our lost condition, in our destitution, in our hopelessness, and he reaches out and he redeems us from our sin. He sets us free from our spiritual bondage, and he brings us into his home. And the book of Ruth is a type, a beautiful picture of what Jesus Christ does for you and I who come to him for salvation. Beautiful book, wonderful story. Leads us straight to Jesus Christ, our Redeemer.